Your question is, what are the types of equity? Answer to this question is, any business in India or globally can have two kinds of capital. The first type of the capital is known as equity share capital, and the second type of the capital is known as preference share capital. What is the difference between these two types of the capitals? There are few differences between these two types of capital. Number one, ownership of a business is always with the equity share capital. So that means the voting power, the decision making power, the control of a business lies always with the people who are holding the equity share capital. Contrary to this, preference share capital, they are not the owners of the business. It is known as preference share capital for two reasons. Number one, the holders of preference share capital have two distinct advantages. And what are those two distinct advantages? Those two distinct advantages are: number one, in case if company decides to pay dividend to the equity shareholders, first company will have to pay dividend to the preference shareholders, and that is why they are known as preference share capital. Only after dividend is paid to the preference shareholders, company will be able to pay dividend to the equity shareholders. That is number one. Number two, in case for some reason this company has to close down and this company is closing down, first the money of preference shareholders will be returned to the preference shareholders. After returning the money of the preference shareholders, if there is any money left, that will be paid to the equity shareholders. And that is the second reason as to why preference share capital is known as preference share capital. The third difference is, in case of preference share capital, the rate of dividend is always fixed. It can be 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%, or whatever it is. It is known in the beginning as to what is the rate of dividend applicable in case of a preference share capital. In case of equity share capital, there is no fixed rate of dividend. It can be 0, it can be 5,000%, and there have been cases in the history of the capital market that companies have paid dividend as high as 5,000%. To my knowledge, because I know once Hero Honda, this company that we have in this country, had paid a dividend at the rate of 5,000%. So that is possible. I'm sure there must have been other incidences where somebody may have paid dividend even at a higher rate than 5,000. So that is what is the third difference. So now this Krishna, this is the difference between the equity share capital and the preference share capital. So there are two types of capital: equity share capital and the preference share capital. Now coming to the equity capital can also be two type. Two type meaning what? Equity capital with voting rights, equity capital without voting rights. So that is also possible. So these are the two types of the equity share capital that you can have. And in our country, there are many companies which have issued equity capital which is without voting rights. So I am sure you can understand why should somebody subscribe to the equity share when he does not have the voting right. And that is because he would need to be compensated in some other form. And therefore, the rate of dividend applicable in case of non-voting share, equity share with no voting right, will always be higher than the rate of dividend applicable in case of equity share capital with voting rights. So this is the difference between different kinds of capital: equity capital, preference share capital, and within equity capital with voting rights, and equity capital without voting rights. I hope that answers your query.